What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan, and today we've got a deck that I've been using to wipe the floor with all those aggro players, making it impossible for them to finally get to 20 and giving us some nice and easy wins. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 1,000 subs, and once we get there, I'm going to give away my copy of the D23 collector set. Make sure you check out that video on our channel for more information, and let's get right into the deck list. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the video. I'll be taking this into Inktable just to show you a practice round of what it looks like against those hyper aggro decks, and generally how I like to play when I face one of those decks. So first up, as you'll notice, we are running Ruby Steel as our color combination. We're going to be running mostly a character-focused build with 57 characters, and the other 3 cards are actually going to be an item card that I'll show you later. Now, the theme of this deck is going to be trying to be as aggressive as possible with our challenging so that we can stop the opponent from getting that extra lore. We're actually going to be using a ability that is specific to Ruby that we don't see much of, and that is the ability to actually take lore away from your opponent. You'll see we have quite a few cards in the deck list that will do that just to prevent those hyper aggro decks from getting to 20 so fast, giving us enough time to set up and put our tempo into a position where we can easily win in the last couple turns. So starting off, we are running 2 copies of the brand new Arthur Novice Sparrow. For a 1-cost uninkable, it is 2 strength, 3 willpower, and it does have Reckless. This will be a card where if we're on the draw, this is what I'm going to be looking to play, but it's not crucial for the deck to really come online. That's why I'm only including 2 copies of it. We can use it to get out our Shift Arthur a little bit faster in the late game, but if you're going second, this is the best turn 1 play that we have, allowing us to take out pretty much anything except that Daisy Duck, which isn't a bad thing for this deck at all since we're running most of the characters. If you feel like 2 is not enough and you want to bump it up to 3, I do have kind of a bonus slot at the end of the deck that I just throw in because I really like the card. You can get rid of that and put this in, and then put another copy of this instead if you like a little bit more consistency. Next up, we are going to be running the 1-drop Robin Hood. He's a 2/2. This is going to be our go-to turn 1 play, getting him on the board, being able to challenge those 1 willpower quick questers, and staying alive is going to be key. And he sets up a classic play on turn 3 with the bigger Robin Hood in the deck as well. We'll run 4 copies of the small Robin Hood. Next up, I am including 3 copies of Flynn Rider Frenemy in the deck. This is also a card slot where I'm not completely sold on it. I have it in here for matchups that aren't hyper aggro, being able to really benefit from our characters having a lot of strength, and getting that 3 lore every turn is really good. Although in a pure aggro matchup, I usually end up inking this because we need to be answering our opponent and not just sitting there getting passive lore. Another new card for Shimmering Skies, it's going to be another Arthur card. This one is a 2/2, questing for 2, and this will be our preferred play on turn 2 if you can get this in your opening hand. He is a great early quester. He can also deal with some of those opposing characters that are trying to just hyper quest with only 1 strength and 1 willpower. And just like the other Arthur, if we have this on the board later in the game, turn 5 we'll be able to shift a big Arthur on top of him, making him a great 4-of inclusion in the deck. Now our last 2-drop character is gonna actually be the new Doc card. When you play him, you have the option to discard your hand and draw 2 cards. In the late game, if you're running out of cards, this is great because you basically get a free 2 card draw with just playing this card. But the real reason I have him in the deck is we actually use a special Piglet card that lets us challenge ready characters if we have no cards in our hand. And this Doc can be used in a pinch to get rid of our hand. Maybe our opponents made us draw a bunch of cards with like a whole new world or something. We can quickly get rid of our hand and then still be able to use Piglet's ability. And I love this card because the ability is optional. So if we do have this card on turn 2, we could still play it and just not use his effect. All right, and now the first card that is going to really put the stall on the game and make it so your opponent actually needs way more lore in order to win the game. It's going to be Aladdin, the street rat. Whenever you play him, your opponent loses 1 lore. This is great because if you can play 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these types of cards, it makes it so your opponent needs to get to 25 to 30 lore instead of 20, which if you're playing against a hyper aggro deck, they usually stall out around 18 if we're able to set up tempo properly. So if we can get them to actually stall out and just have 10 instead, we're in a great position to win the game. Another card that's going to do a very similar thing is the brand new Donald Duck Daisy's Date. Whenever you challenge with this Donald, each opponent's going to actually lose 1 lore, and we're playing this on turn 3 in most cases, because on turn 4 the game plan is going to be attack, use his ability to -1 lore from our opponent, and then we'll shift in the brand new Donald Duck to get even more lore loss. And it's a combo that I really like in this deck. Since we're playing with a couple of different shift targets, Floodborn characters, I am including 3 copies of Honest John, Not That Honest. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, and it doesn't need to be whenever you shift play a Floodborn character, each opponent loses a lore. I think by now you can get the theme of the deck. It's really just extending that win total that our opponent needs to get to, which is great because not only does it keep hyper aggro decks in check, any deck that has been questing in the early game, we're going to make it really annoying for them to get to their total, while towards the end of our deck list, we have a lot of ways to quickly gain lore, meaning that we should be able to outrace most deck lists. And then our removal for this deck is actually going to be Sisu, Daring Visitor. She's just a 1/1 evasive, but when you play her, you can banish a character with 1 strength or less. This is great when your opponent's playing those hyper aggro characters. They typically only have 1 strength, so you can use Sisu to get rid of one that is ready and unable to be challenged before they're able to cash in and get that lore. This is great for if your opponent has like a Maleficent on the board, a Lilo on the board, or the best target actually would be the 3 lore Pinocchio that's just a 1/1. Getting that off the board before Conquest is always worthwhile. Following up on that, I am including 3 copies of Pete, Games Referee. This is one of the most highly talked about cards in Shimmering Skies, just being able to keep the board state in a kind of status quo, not allow your opponents to play any items. This is great if your opponent's out of cards and you think they're going to draw into a whole new world. You can prevent them from getting all that card drawback. You can prevent a Be Prepared from wiping out your board after you've gone wide. This is something we typically are going to be mulliganing away, and preferably trying to see this in the late game so that we can set up a go wide combo play and use Pete as that kind of like protection. Next up, we do have a 4-cost Goofy Super Goof. He has Rush, and whenever he challenges another character, you actually gain 2 lore, which is great because this is actually one of the ways that we are going to be accumulating lore for ourselves to win the game. We have a few characters that benefit from attacking, so this Goofy being able to come onto the field, rush attack somebody, and you get 2 lore as well, makes him a great card to include in this deck. Now my favorite card that I love so much, I actually went and bought a enchanted version that I can't wait to arrive of Donald. It's Donald Duck the Pie Slinger. He's just a 3/6, but if you shift play him, your opponent's actually going to lose 2 lore. So if you combo this with the Donald that we talked about earlier, you can attack with the Donald, they'll lose the lore. And then after you've attacked with him and he's exerted, you can just shift this Donald on top of him if he's still on the field. And now your opponent's lost 3 lore in the 1 turn. And then his secondary ability, when your opponent has 10 or more lore, he's actually going to get +6 strength, making him a 9/6, which is easily going to be able to benefit from the Flynn Rider ability and get us that 3 lore per turn, while also being able to take out most things in 1 single go. Next up, just because we need a little bit extra removal, we have 2 copies of Maui, Hero to All. He's Rush and Reckless, and he's a 6/5. Being able to play this on turn 5, getting rid of one of our opponent's big characters that they've turned, it's very useful. Maui's been a popular card since set 1, so no surprise here that we're including him in the deck as well. Following up on that, here's the Piglet that I talked about a little bit earlier. This is from Ursula's Return. Piglet, Sturdy Swordsman. He has Resist 1, he quests for 3, and when he's not questing, he's got the ability, while you have no cards in your hand, he can actually challenge ready characters. So if we get one of these late game, and we're able to use a dock to clear out our hand, or maybe we just don't have a lot of cards in our hand because we don't run a lot of card draw in this deck list, Piglet's going to be able to challenge things that are entering on the same turn, meaning that your opponent's really going to be stalled trying to get those last couple lore, especially if we've been doing our job properly and doing -1, -2 to them throughout the game. And then next up, the most expensive card in the deck list, it's going to be the Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood. This is a card that I would prefer not to take out. I understand if you don't have already a playset of Robin Hood, it's going to be very expensive to acquire, but Robin Hood, whenever he challenges and banishes another character, you're going to gain 2 lore. That's our alternative way besides questing to get lore. And when he's banished, you actually can draw a card. If you can, I would include 4 copies of him in the deck list. If not, you may need to look for a different Floodborn to include instead. And then speaking of Floodborn, we have another one to talk about here. It's going to be from one of the starter decks in set 1. It is Aladdin, Heroic Outlaw. He is shift 5, so preferably on turn 5 we're going to play him. And whenever he banishes a character, you're going to gain 2 lore and your opponent's going to lose 2 lore. If you can get this card up and running, especially against a aggro deck, you're able to keep your opponent in check while also getting the benefit of like questing with him, and you get lore every time that he takes something out. And then next up, another Floodborn that we're talking about today. It's going to be the new Arthur, King Victorious, another shift 5 character. When you play him, you give a character Challenger +2 and also Resist +2, and they can challenge ready characters. The best part is you can actually give it to himself. So if you shift this onto another Arthur, an Arthur, you can actually use it to instantly take something out, especially with his a little bit bigger stat line. He's going to be swinging for 5, and with the Resist 2 and 6 health, he's going to be able to survive most things. But the main reason we include him is because in the late game, being able to challenge something that's ready means that they're going to be stuck at their lore total and not be able to quest to win. And then the other removal that we have in the deck is going to be 2 copies of the Sisu Empowered Sibling. She's also a Floodborn. When you play this character, banish all opposing characters 2 strength or less. This is a great card because not only does it have a board wipe capability, it also quests for quite a lot, which is kind of the theme of the more expensive cards in our deck. They are questing for quite a lot, but they have very strong end of the battlefield effects, meaning if we get them online, we can most likely close out most games. And then the last character card that I've included in the deck list, this is my wild card slot, so you can get rid of them, put another copy of one of the other cards. Maybe you want another Maui, maybe you want another Arthur like I talked about before. But I love this Gaston Pure Paragon. For each damage character you have in play, you pay 2 less ink to play this character. So even if we only have 2 damage characters on our side of the field, he's actually now just a 5 cost character. So you're getting a 5 cost, 10/6 questing for 2 with Rush, and with how much attacking that we are looking to do with this deck, I've been able to get him out quite consistently. You're just going to want to make sure that you're challenging into things that aren't going to take your characters out if you're looking to get Gaston out in that turn. And then the only item in the deck is going to be the Sword Released. 3 copies of this. At the start of your turn, if you have a character with more strength than each opposing character in play, your opponent will lose 1 lore and you'll gain that lore. If we're able to get like a Maui out, if we're able to get that Gaston out, or if we have a Donald out and your opponent has already passed that 10 lore threshold, this will almost guarantee to be online, as well as the Flynn Rider that we have, meaning that we could potentially be getting 4 lore for free every turn, while our opponent is losing 1 every turn. And that does it. That is the deck list for our anti-aggro Ruby hero. In the games that I've played, it has been wiping the floor with hyper aggro against Steel Song. The only area that this truly struggles is against ramp. If they're not looking to quest, we can find some trouble getting our characters. We can have some trouble getting those activations and not getting the most out of our minus lore abilities, meaning that once the ramp deck comes online, we most likely are going to be just outshined. But with how popular hyper aggro is right now in the meta, I can confidently take this deck into locals and not worry about playing against a super late game ramp deck. And then before we move on to the gameplay portion of the video, I did want to talk about the pure counter to this deck. It's going to be the 2-cost Coda card. During your opponent's turns, you can't lose lore. I've never seen this card be played, but if my deck were to become something that was super popular and something that's in the meta, I wouldn't be surprised if people start including this just to counter it. But with that being said, them being forced to have this card just to account for our playstyle, I think is a net positive, because instead of having more copies of the ones that they want, they're going to be forced to throw some Codas in there. Yes, he still quests for 2, but he can be taken out by mostly everything that we're playing with. So we would just need to get one of those characters that can challenge a ready character on the board, and then we can resume our losing lore shenanigans. Alright, so we've loaded our deck up against a Amber Amethyst deck. We're going to let them go first, just to simulate how much pressure that they're going to be able to put onto us and win in that turn 5. Alright, so for our mulligan, we actually want to get rid of the characters that we don't need in an aggro matchup. So we can get rid of the Mally and the Flynn. I also want to get rid of the Pete just because I know there's no actions coming. I'm tempted to keep this Sisu, but I really want to see the small Sisu in my hand. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get to turn 8 to play this. Okay, and then we got a pretty bad mulligan here as well. But we do hit the Sisu, which is finally some good news for us. Our only play here, though, is just to ink the Pete and pass it back. At least now on turn 3, we can take out probably that Daisy Duck after they've given us a couple cards. We get another Arthur from Daisy, and then we get a Piglet as well. So these Arthurs are actually pretty good for getting us some extra ink. And then we can play one, and we'll pass it back. Here comes the Donald Duck. And we'll get another card from Daisy Questing. And it's actually another Sisu. So now what we can do is we can actually get rid of the Daisy. We have quite a good hand now. And we draw into the big Sisu. So even better. I don't need 2 Robin Hoods now. So we'll just play little Sisu, get rid of the Daisy. And then I actually am just going to quest with Arthur to get us on the board. I'm not that scared of them having a bodyguard on the field. Especially since on turn 6 we're going to be able to do a full wipe of everything. Okay, and they get rid of the Arthur for us. And they play another Daisy. Alright, back to inking. We're going to get rid of the Robin Hood. And here we will play another Sisu, getting rid of the Wendy because we do like getting the extra cards, and we'll play an Arthur as well. Since we have another Sisu on the board now, we'll just go ahead and take out the bodyguard while we can. And then we'll pass. So we're in a pretty good spot. It's 9-2. They have no cards in their hand. We just got an Aladdin from the Daisy. So now our turn 5 play can actually just be getting an Arthur down and getting a Aladdin down. We get another Donald Duck, which we will ink, and then we can actually play Arthur and Aladdin. They go down to 12. And then our Arthur has to challenge into Daisy. And next turn they're going to get to 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So unfortunately, I think we're just going to gamble here and we'll pass. Because if we can get big Sisu out, it'll clear the board. But we're gambling because if they have the Gathering Wisdom, they can just get 2 lore instantly and win. We get a Donald, and what card do they have? Oh, it's just ink. Okay. Alright, so we can actually now just ink this extra Donald. We'll play the Sisu, clear the board. And now everyone's going to quest. And because we have a big Arthur in our hand, we can challenge anything that comes onto the field. So we can get rid of that Wendy, no problem. We will ink the Donald. And then what we're going to do is we're going to play King Arthur. I'm going to put him onto the damaged Arthur, just because this one quests for 2. We'll give it to Aladdin, because he only has 1 lore. He'll take out Wendy. We can quest then for 3, 6, 8 here. So unless they pulled the item to win the game, which they didn't, they just passed it back to us, we can go ahead and just quest with our big characters and close out the game. So that one was pretty stressful. It is a lot harder to win on the draw against a hyper aggro deck, but we pulled it off. Having that Arthur come in late in the game, being able to challenge something that was ready. Luckily getting the big Sisu to do a full board wipe came in clutch. If we didn't get the big Sisu, I probably would have tried to play Donald, getting him to attack something, and then playing the bigger Donald to minus their lore even more. So we had a couple of different ways that we could have tackled it. Luckily, we got all the cards that we needed, and they didn't pull the action that they needed to win the game. If this was a best 2 out of 3, we probably would lose if we got into a similar situation and our cards weren't as good of a pull. But we have a lot better chance winning on the play, getting out in front of all those aggro characters, meaning most likely in this matchup we would have pulled out the best of 2 or 3. All right, and that does it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Take a look at the deck list. I posted it in the description. You can take a look at it on Dreamborn. Let me know in the comments what you think of this deck. I know it's not the best one in all scenarios, but if we're gonna see a hyper aggro meta really take hold and get placements in tournaments, we might need to start taking a look at some of these Ruby characters that put a halt on their lore gain. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. I'll be back with another version of this deck, but instead of with steel, we'll do a Ruby Amber version of this deck. Maybe that one works in more scenarios. Maybe it tackles aggro and ramp. We'll put it together. I'll test it out against a bunch of different opponents, and I'll be back here to let you guys know. I'll see you guys next time. See ya.